is Belinda Dovson, and welcome to the I Ching Cafe and this episode of our weekly overviews for the week commencing the 13th of July 2020. Last week was indeed a very interesting week. We were being called to pay attention to what is attracting us in life, what is drawing us forward, with the proviso being, don't be too quick to talk about it because the influence might leave you sooner than it arrived. And of course, rounding up the week with 33 retreat, asking us to withdraw into the cave and just take some time out to regroup. We had an interesting experience here that for almost 3 days we had no power. So this episode almost did not happen, and thank you in the nick of time the power came back on. It was quite an interesting experience, and I kept on thinking about 33 retreat, going back into the cave of darkness, the case may be for us this past week. All right, so let's have a look at what this week is all about, what we are asked to pay attention to. The I Ching is asking us to focus. There's a lot going on. What is the big theme of focus we could pay attention to really help us accelerate and really help us move through in tune with the flow of change happening around you? And of course, the thing with this whole I Ching process is trust your own life. We are talking about bigger themes that we all need to pay attention to. In your own life, there'll be cycles of change you need to pay attention to. So bear that in mind. Right, let's get into it. So our first hexagram for the week, our first flow of change for this week is hexagram 11, peace. If you've seen the monthly for July, you will know that peace is the second transforming figure or relating hexagram for the month of July. So interesting that here we are in the 13th of July this week, and here we're getting into the second half of the month, and boom, there the cycle of peace comes in. And I have spoken about how interesting it is that we have these cycles of interconnected hexagrams from week to week and month to month. Okay, so peace. This is the hexagram where literally we have heaven in the bottom and earth on the top, and earth sinks, heaven rises, and there's this natural affinity where everything is in perfect position. It's the connection of flow. I spoke about in the monthly episode the idea of conception, of gunk, creation has manifested. The gate is open, and this kind of flooding of energy from heaven and earth makes its mark. It starts to grow. The blessing can manifest through the connection that has taken place. So in this week, what are we being asked to pay attention to? We are being asked to open ourselves up to that connection, to the flow that's coming, something that is connecting, that has struggled for a long time. If you've been working through something where things have really been struggling to connect, you might feel gunk. In the second half of this month of July, we look at the monthly overview and this week's one, connection is made. The process of creation is established. Something is flowing now that was stuck or blocked before. And we can just relish in it and focus on opening ourselves up to this flow, of just being present with it, of giving it energy, of giving it life. And the more that we give it, the more the blessing can flow. This is very much a hexagram of flow of change, about blessings and about the time being right, the stars being aligned, things can now happen. So we have one changing line for this week. It's in the second position. So a little bit of change, nothing too dramatic. And this changing line is quite interesting. It talks about the need that in this flow of peace, as we move through this heaven on earth and things connecting, things can easily disintegrate in this moment of alignment. And our task this week is to cross the great water. Now in the I Ching, whenever you see this term, crossing the great water, it is a symbol of taking on the challenge or making an important transition or taking on the challenge. Because if you stood next to a river that's raging, you will know, looking at it, So this process is about taking on that challenge, on crossing the water, taking on the challenge. This week though, with this idea of taking on the challenge this week, of having heaven and earth line up for you, allowing you, bringing you energy to take on this challenge, there are also some other things to think about. The first thing in this changing line is that in this journey, you might feel either isolated, in other words, you're surrounded by people who are not up to the challenge, who are not the highest and the best, or you feel alone. Alone, in other words, there's no one around. Feeling alone in the crowd. And this week is all about accepting that your task is to take on the challenge and to cross this challenge. And even if you might feel alone, or you might feel alone in the crowd where there isn't a resonance with your deeper purpose or the higher mission or the important work or the skill that you're expecting, is to do it anyway. And bear in mind the goal that you are working towards. So in the hexagram structure, our line here, that's the changing line in 2, is wanting to move towards position 5, wanting to connect to the higher goal that is being brought to us through peace, through heaven on earth. And our task is, don't forget the long-term goal. Don't get caught up in the little relationships and the little complexities around you and wanting to stay where you are because that's where your friends or the people you know. This line is giving you permission to leave where you are, to leave what you know, to leave your group that is familiar, and undertake this challenge of going alone, even if you need to, because you have to stay focused on the bigger picture you are here to fulfill. So quite an interesting and complex line for us this week. You've got to get into what is the challenge that you need to undertake this week. What is the obstacle that's holding you back? Is it this team around you who don't feel up to the challenge? Or is it the team around you who are not like-minded? Just tolerate the imperfections in other people. This is a message of peace internally. Peace begins with me. Have peace with the people around you who don't have the skills and resources and expertise or mindset that you do. Make peace with their imperfection and make peace with your task being to push for that summit, to push for the goal that you are aiming towards. And even if you feel alone, even if you feel you're surrounded by people who are not up to the challenge, cross the great water. Now, our outcome hexagram for this week, interesting one, we've had it quite a few times before, is hexagram 36, Darkening of the Light. And this is the hexagram where I spoke about you're in a forest and you've got wolves, you can hear them woo in the background, and you need to make a fire to keep yourself warm. The way you do that is you dig a fire pit and you make the fire underneath the level of the ground so no one can see it. This is about hiding your light, hiding your intelligence, your capacity in the earth until it's time it's safe to come out. This is not about not taking action. When we had 33 retreat, that was about actually withdrawing from the situation, going into the cave. We had that last week. This is actually about taking on the challenge, undertaking something difficult, but hiding your light as you do it. So think about being surrounded by these people who aren't up for the challenge in our changing line. And the advice that we need to be at peace with people who don't have the same capacity as we do, or the skills or the talent or the mindset, is in the midst of those people, in the midst of the world we're in, is just put a little bit of a protection around your light, around what you do know. This is not a week to go out and be very vocal and put yourself out as a standing light in front of others. This is where you work undercover, okay? You're quiet, you just kind of go about your business, take on the challenge. It might be difficult, but there's a process of just protecting who you are, just acting a little silly or just blending into the crowd, because that is how you're going to get the job done this week. That's how you're going to work towards this beautiful purpose that the changing line is calling us to focus on and move towards. Interesting week. All right, so don't forget that if you have not yet done so, to go and put your question into the monthly I Ching giveaway. July 1 closes on the end of July, so please do go and do that. This is your opportunity to have your question put in, and I see that if you contribute a question, it's an act of generosity on your part, because you're being vulnerable and you're sharing your question and you're putting it out there, and I really value every single question that gets submitted. So please go along, follow the link below this episode, and go and get your question into the I Ching for the month of July. Other than that, wishing you a wonderful week, and I will see you on our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter stories. So do pop along to those to go and check out what the flows of change are on a daily basis, and to stay up to date with the latest news on the channel. Thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you soon.